Hey everyone, good morning, wonderful Thursday. I'm sure it's been a huge day for everyone. Welcome to the MDR for Better ROI. My name is Albert. I work right here at Brian Thorne, and let me introduce you to our one and only Alyssa Knight. She'll be conducting this webinar. Just let you know, guys, that it will last about 30 minutes. We'll have a quick Q&A at the end for about 5 to 10 minutes. So yeah, hope you enjoy, guys. We'll be here. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone. For those of you who do not know me, my reputation does not precede me. I am the group CEO of Brian Thorne. Typical Hollywood story, arrested as a teenager for hacking a government network, recruited by the USIC, hacked over 100 networks over the last 20 years. I am a published author. The book was Hacking Connected Cars. I've received a new book contract from Wiley on hacking APIs. And last year, traveled around Europe and Asia, talking about the 30 bank apps that I downloaded and hacked in less than a week. I am a serial entrepreneur. I started and sold 2 previous cybersecurity startups. And that's me in a nutshell, Cliff Notes version of Alyssa Knight. So what exactly is MDR? A lot of you guys have probably seen this term thrown around on Twitter, LinkedIn, MSSPs talking about it. Another new acronym in our industry. And this presentation really is helping you guys. I'm really just going to demystify it for you and really help you understand the difference between MDR, NDR, traditional eyes on glass network security monitoring services, and how that differs from MDR. So one of the things that I can tell you is it's typically outsourced. Obviously, the term managed detection response is you're outsourcing that to a managed security service provider. They're, as part of the MDR service, they're typically providing threat hunting. And I'll talk about that here in a moment, but basically, MDR is an immediate response to threats as they're discovered. So what's different about MDR and traditional network security monitoring, and I'll continue to decompile this for you, but traditional network security monitoring is SOC analysts with eyes on glass monitoring a SIEM and raising tickets for you to basically confirm the threat, make sure it's not a false positive, going out to the machine, taking a look at it, closing out the ticket, responding to the ticket. It's very laborious. So MDR kind of grew up in this need, in this world for a need, where you really can just kind of trust your MSSP to take care of this for you. They're going to be doing threat hunting. They're going to be identifying threats and taking an immediate response posture to those threats that they've identified. So what exactly is threat hunting, other than a really cool word? It's proactive and iterative detection, isolation, and response to advanced threats on the network that have invaded your security controls. So if a threat has, let's say, an adversary gains a foothold on your network, they've gotten around your NDR, they've gotten around your firewalls, they are on your network. Threat hunting is this sort of proactive, regular hunting exercise to find those adversaries that have gotten around those security controls. One thing that you need to understand is this concept of MTTR and MTTD, and that's mean time to response and mean time to detection. I'm always telling people that in today's world, we're really no longer talking about intrusion prevention anymore. It's really about detection, because it's not about if you'll get compromised, but when, right? So, we've kind of gotten away from this narrative of preventing the breach from happening in the first place, and more about lowering that mean time to response and mean time to detection. And MDR services or threat hunting allows you to do that. If you're actively looking for that threat, if you're actively looking for that malware or that adversary, you will lower that MTTD and MTTR. Why would you want to lower that MTTD? What's the purpose? The purpose is to lower the cost, right? The longer I'm on your network, the more data I'm pilfering, the more credentials I'm pilfering, the more data I can sell on the dark web, it's the more costly it is to you, right? The longer I'm on your network, the more costly the cleanup, the more costly the incident response. So lowering that MTTR and MTTD is absolutely critical. So what's MDR anyway? Again, it's typically outsourced to an MSSP using a proprietary technology stack as part of the price, right? It provides threat hunting. That's totally the same slide. Looks like I just expounded on it. So again, you're responding to identified threats immediately. As you guys can see, I did this PowerPoint like an hour before this presentation. Anyway, in addition to that, it's also identifying threats on the network and endpoints, combining it with user behavior analysis or UBA solutions, user behavioral analytics, and application threat analytics. So you're really combining this proprietary technology stack of different tools for EDR, network detection and response, or NDR, typically using machine learning instead of signatures, these sort of new breed of ML-powered security controls in order to identify these adversaries or these threats. One of the things that is really a hallmark capability or feature of MDR services is the MSSP using a tip. In a traditional network security monitoring scenario where you've outsourced NSM to an MSSP, you usually have to pay extra for tip services. You usually have to, if they have a tip, have to subscribe to it, and they're usually really expensive. They're usually really costly. With MDR, the tip is really part of that proprietary stack. It's really difficult to perform threat hunting and sort of have that early warning to threats without a tip. So take that into consideration when you're looking at MDR services. Again, that MSSP will typically bring a proprietary stack with them. Now, let's sort of decompile MDR versus traditional network security monitoring. Traditional network security monitoring involves eyes-on-glass monitoring of events the organization sends the MSSP. So they're going to determine what events they're going to send the SIEM. Whether it's endpoint logs, like syslog, Windows event logs, firewall logs, they're going to determine what they're going to ingest into the SIEM that the MSSP is monitoring. In MDR, it typically involves the analysis of all events and logs provided by the MSSP's proprietary technology stack, which again is typically comprised of SOAR, EDR, NDR, those sort of technologies. When a threat is identified, in MDR services, the MSSP will typically remote into the network, perform isolate the host, perform the response activities, do the forensics. It's very incident response centric, right? One of the biggest fails that I see with typical MSSP is like, oh, we're going to provide MDR services now. They don't really have an IR capability. And, it really is very heavily centered around incident response. So that's something to look for when you're shopping around for an MSSP that provides MDR. MDR typically involves the creation and maintenance of IR playbooks. You see these with SOAR platforms, and also these new generation of SIEM platforms that actually are combining SOAR capabilities. So, when you've adopted these sort of next gen SIEMs, I always kind of talked about very early on with the SOAR industry and the SIEM industry sort of doing this convergence, where SIEM solution providers were going to begin acquiring SOAR or SOAR acquiring SIEM. And we saw that with Splunk acquiring Phantom. What was the other one? Palo Alto Networks acquiring Demisto. So you have this sort of convergence of these solution stacks. And now you've got like the logarithms of the world to say, you know what? You don't need a SOAR. We're going to begin adopting these SOAR capabilities into your existing SIEM platform. Again, MDR is not compliance driven. So when you outsource services to an MSSP, to provide traditional network security monitoring. It's very compliance driven. It's, trying to meet those compliance requirements like PCI DSS, HIPAA, high tech. It's very, give us our compliance report on compliance. Whereas MDR is more tactical, right? It's more, I'm going to dedicate this team of threat hunters to you who are going to be doing round-the-clock threat hunting, identifying adversaries, identifying malicious applications, malware, malicious software on the network, and taking immediate action on it and giving you a report when we've taken care of it. You're not really drowning in those tickets to take a look at. MDR typically involves the creation and maintenance of IR playbooks, like I said. So they're going to be typically running and operating that SOAR platform with you, and they'll typically it should integrate with your existing security controls. So, again, they're going to bring that technology stack along with that SOAR solution where the IR playbooks are being created and maintained by that MSSP. Traditional NSM services don't usually include tip monitoring. Again, I spoke about that earlier. Tip platforms like Recorded Future, those are all very expensive solutions, and they should come with that MDR threat hunting service. Traditional NSM typically gives you very little human analyst support, often relying on tier 1 analysts due to automated protection. So, with traditional NSM, you've got your typical tiered models of, our tier 1 analysts are going to monitor your network. They're typically junior, not many hours on the job, and they're looking through that haystack looking for the needle. They're looking for that signal in the noise. When they think they've found it, it's then hopefully escalated up to a tier 2 analyst who then either confirms that it's not a false positive, or hopefully a lot of the false positive elimination is done by the tier 1, but that's rare. And the tier 2 will typically confirm that and or escalate or bring that issue to the customer. It's sort of the difference between this sort of conveyor belt model to a more of an elite tactical team who's sort of assigned your account that's doing round-the-clock threat hunting and isolation of hosts and immediate response actions to detected threats. Traditional NSM drowns you in a sea of tickets to confirm and respond to those threats. We hear that a lot at Briar & Thorn, where customers were like, look, I retained an MSSP for a reason. I don't have the internal people, I don't have the internal resources to dedicate to dealing with all of these tickets. I'm tired of my MSSP continuously just shotgunning these tickets over to me. A lot of them are real threats and require immediate action, but I didn't have the internal team to be able to analyze it and respond. So about 15, 20 years ago, CISOs were very reticent to, just apprehensive to outsource and trust their MSSP to take action on detected threats. Giving the MSSP the keys to the kingdom and saying, you know what, I trust you with my job. You just come in and perform your activities and immediately respond to threats. I think, times have really changed, and I don't know if it's because of the number of breaches or I don't know, the technology stack, the maturity of technology stacks. But CISOs now are less apprehensive to do that, and they're starting to give MSSPs that trust and saying, you know what, I don't want traditional network security monitoring. That model does not work. That model is broken. I want MDR. I want you to come in and take immediate action on detected threats and just tell me about it once it's done. Tell me what you did once you've done it. And I think that the industry has just slowly and progressively moved in that direction. And we're definitely seeing more of a demand for MDR at Briar & Thorn than your traditional network security monitoring services. So I love analogies because you could typically take a very I think, labyrinthine topic and explain it in a way that people can really understand it. So the analogy here with MDR and traditional network security monitoring is traditional network security monitoring, or NSM, is really just sort of that ADT approach where you've got this, SOC of people just monitoring video cameras and responding to alarms for break-ins. It's like, okay, watching that camera 24 hours a day, looking at those ingress and egress points, looking for alarms that haven't been shut off, just relying on your security controls to tell you about something bad. Whereas MDR is actually sending the security guard on their rounds and looking around for signs of break-in, looking for jimmied locks, looking for broken windows, looking for doors that have been kicked in. So indicators of a breach, or in our world, indicators of compromise. That is the best analogy I can give you for MDR. It's this sort of approach where you're just not really relying entirely on the security controls, on the detective security controls. You're actually out there hunting for threats, looking for bad stuff, looking for bad guys and bad gals who've taken a foothold on your network, pivoting around and leaving indicators of compromise everywhere. That is MDR. So that is it. That is MDR in a nutshell and how it compares to traditional network security monitoring. This is how you can reach me. You can email me. You can hit me up and subscribe to me on YouTube. Connect with me on LinkedIn. DM me on Twitter. I will hand the microphone back over to you, to Caroline and Albert, to answer Q&A.
Hey guys, so we have a question right now. Alyssa, threat hunting is a bit of a gray area. What tools should a company have to perform for threat hunting?
So, it's sort of one of those things where, it's that Swiss Army knife where you don't want to just rely on the knife, but, you want that screwdriver, you want that toothpick, whatever. It's really a culmination of different security controls. You definitely want to make sure you have some sort of EDR technology in place versus your, legacy antivirus like Symantec. Doing traditional antivirus. You want the ability to use an EDR tool to isolate machines that you've determined there's a threat on it, whether it's malware or an adversary, but isolating those hosts using an EDR solution. Combining that with network detection and response solutions powered by machine learning versus your traditional snort sensors running IDS signatures. So you're combining the detective and reactive security controls of EDR as well as NDR. Also, like I said, user behavior anomaly detection, UBA, and looking for signs of just distractors or detractors from your typical user behavior. If Albert never VPNs in at 2 a.m. and all of a sudden that's what he's doing, and he's never VPN'd in from Ukraine, that sort of thing. And combining that also with other events from that technology stack. So it's not really just relying on one particular tool. I would definitely say it's going to be difficult to do anything like that without EDR.
Great. Next question. Thank you for that answer, Alyssa. Recommendations for threat intelligence platforms.
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm a big fan of Recorded Future. It's not cheap. Definitely evaluate the size of your budget. But I'm a big believer in you pay for what you get. Actually, I'm going to punt a part of that question over to Caroline. Caroline, I know you've been doing a lot of research historically on, tip platforms, threat intelligence platforms. But I know there's even an open source free solution out there as well. But Yeah, I'm on the commercial side. I'm definitely more partial to recorded future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think recorded future is one of the big ones. Of course, it comes with a cost. There are a couple of alternative open source options. So one of the ones that we have heard good things about is the one that actually was created by Palo Alto. And
oh, that's right. Palo Alto has one.
Yeah, the name escapes me right now.
Hold on, I'm going to Google it.
But what happened with this platform is essentially it has all these open source communities that are feeding into it, and you can spun up that in your environment and actually add sources as you will. So you can add
it's
something like
MindMeld,
OTX,
right?
MindMeld. Yeah, thank you. So you can add something like OTX, you can add even feeds from Cisco Talos and all these kind of renowned sources and have them all collecting that data and centralizing it in MindMeld. So that would be a good opportunity for you if you don't have the budget perhaps for like one of these big tip platforms. That's a really good alternative.
Hey, Caroline, I also noticed that they actually support recorded future. So you can actually, with MindMeld, you guys can actually build miners, and a lot of them will support, it actually looks like support for a lot of the major tip platforms like Anomaly and Threat Quotient, as well as recorded future.
Yes, I mean, definitely. I think it's something, as with everything in open source, obviously you have to invest the man hours, right? So you have to configure it and stuff like that. But I think if you don't have the budget and you're really looking for an alternative as far as threat intelligence, that would be a good start off point. You could start with some feeds and just making sure that they're feeding into that MindMill platform, and that'll get you started. And as you mature your program, you could start making it a little bit more, I would say, custom and add a little bit more of a pizzazz to it.
Yeah, thanks for that, Caroline. I appreciate it. Yeah, I would say, guys, and girls, if you don't have the budget for recorded future, a good alternative is Anomaly. Threat Quotient is another one. Recorded future, I think, is the most expensive of the options. But of course, free is always good too. There, like Caroline mentioned, we've heard great things about MindMeld. So I know I'm pretty sure, keep me honest here, Caroline, but I think it's even part of Brian Thorne's stack as well. So.
Yeah, definitely a good option for everybody.
Great. Well, great answer. For anyone doubting there, Caroline is our CEO for Latin America. So yeah. Last question on this. Any other one pops up from Hector? What is the level of access needed for MDR? And do you have to be domain admins?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, this is where it's really important to have your security controls in place that will help address that level of access that's needed. Enterprise admin, domain admin, of course, if you're going to be performing anything requiring administration of the Active Directory forest. But again, if you have an EDR solution capable of isolating hosts, and either disabling that TCP/IP stack in the operating system, or creating its own isolated net from the rest of the internet, that's where EDR is going to be really powerful. I've never really seen MDR, threat hunting services, implemented without EDR. I've just never seen it. You need that capability to be able to give the MSSP the keys to the kingdom, if you will, to be able to at an endpoint level immediately take action on objectives and respond to threats. But great question, Hector.
We got one more. With email protection, providing multiple layers of security response, do you see a merging of security technologies with literally all-in-one solutions where anomaly detection, IDS, email protection, XDR, and companies could see a complete single provider for all security needs from vendors?
Thanks, Selwyn. That's a great question. That's one thing that I think historically, if you look over the last 2 decades, right? I mean, 20 years ago was a very different industry, right? It was all about snort signatures, pattern matching, really sort of, if you guys remember Shadow, the Shadow project out of the Naval Surface Warfare Center, was all looking for patterns and TCP dumps. And now we've kind of really gotten to a point now with big data and data lakes and Elastic and all that fun stuff where machine learning is a real thing and actually works. AI and cybersecurity is a thing. So there's over the last 20 years has sort of been this continuous evolution of security controls where you'll have these individual controls by themselves that end up getting merged into a single stack. So do you guys remember this with firewalls, right? With firewalls, we had these sort of first gen firewalls that did port filtering. And then we started to see this emergence of UTMs or Unified Threat Management Solutions where the firewall could do intrusion prevention. It could do web application firewalling. It could do all of these things, rate limiting, DDoS protection. It was an all-in-one solution. Then now we're seeing this with other products. Now we're seeing the CM integrate capabilities of SOAR. Sawan, that's a great question. I think the answer to your question is yes. I don't know about email protection though. Like I've never kind of really seen these cloud email security solutions sort of merging in other capabilities, obviously probably because of just where they're positioned in the network. Typically, proxying your email for your MX records, it doesn't make sense to combine anything else out there. But the other technologies you mentioned, like XDR, NDR, email, really anything DR being integrated into a single stack. I definitely see that happening. I think we're seeing it happen right now.
Great question, so on. A new one popped up. So is EDR necessary for MDR, and are there other alternatives?
It's funny. Sorry, Siri thought I was talking to her. One of the things that I noticed is just recently wanting to find an EDR solution even for the home, right? So I'll have family members that will call me out and say, Ali, come out here, install antivirus for me. And it would be great if Tanium or, any of these other EDR solutions offered a home version, because I'm just so sick of the Kasperskys of the world, the McAfees of the world for your home antivirus. I want to see EDR at home, right? I don't see how any enterprise can continue using legacy antivirus and not migrate to EDR. But for those companies that don't have EDR, is it necessary in order to, outsource MDR to an MSSP? I guess not. It's not really required, but it should definitely be part of the stack. Again, the ability to isolate machines where you've detected threats is huge. Quickly recover. There's some EDR solutions like SentinelOne where you can quickly recover to a previously known good state, in addition to being able to isolate. Same thing with Tanium. So the EDR component offers a lot of capabilities for that MSSP to perform those functions. And like Sawan mentioned, hopefully I'm pronouncing her name, Sawan, asked the question of what kind of level of access do you need? Oh, sorry, that was actually Hector. So that's really important. Do you need it? No. Does it make life easier? Yes. You can use other tools. You can use other solutions. There's another solution from Unisys. Trying to remember the name of it. It's called Stealth, which does software-defined networking, SDN, software-based microsegmentation, software-defined microsegmentation, and you can create these sort of cloaked hosts, and they're great for performing MDR services using a solution like that, because you can, log into that Unisys platform, log into that device and cloak it, and just immediately remove it off the network and isolate it. So, that's another thing, like stealth. If you're looking for an alternative to EDR. But yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, again, security should be like layers of an onion. You don't want to rely on just one thing. It needs to be building layers of security controls around your crown jewels and what you're actually trying to protect.
So one more. Are you seeing SIEM and antivirus as legacy?
I know. I was waiting for that question. I know that there's people that are going to throw mud at me and troll me because I use the word legacy a lot with solutions that we still use today. I don't think that SIEM is legacy, no. I think there's definitely legacy antivirus. Where just the old days come back to me of responding code redworm and constantly having to get new data updates from Symantec because you kept seeing new variants. Those days are hopefully gone. But is SIEM? No, I don't really think I see SIEM as legacy. I definitely am seeing CISOs move to alternatives to SIEM. The high ingest costs of SIEM solutions are very cost prohibitive, and we're seeing people move to sort of this more data lake centric approach to monitoring with things like Elastic, using an elk stack as a replacement for SIEM. Just sort of getting away from that expensive SIEM ingest model where they're going to massive data lakes and doing analytics on it using ML models. But I wouldn't call SIEM legacy. I think it's definitely, if you're going to have a SIEM, you definitely want a SOAR. You definitely want to combine it with SOAR to try and limit the amount of manual human interaction that's needed for identifying and responding to events. But no, I wouldn't call SIEM legacy.
We always get this question, so
it's a good one. I mean, I think it's, I don't know. I think it's coming. I think the window, like anything, is closing on SIEM. But I think a lot of CISOs are beginning to question their ROI on SIEM. I mean, I know, Caroline, you and I probably could debate this all day long because I know you have your position on it, and yes. I'm more cynical. I'm the cynicist at Briar and Thorn. I'm very cynical, but for me, I don't know. I don't see the value. It's expensive. Do you guys remember those multi-million-dollar ArcSight deployments? It's expensive. Splunk is expensive. A lot of these, they're expensive, Caroline. So, but I think we're just starting, CISOs are very, careful with their budget. They're very guarded with their money, and rightly so. They should be constantly evaluating whether or not a security control is returning that investment. SIEM is expensive. And when you have things like Elastic Stack, and you have these companies that are moving to now, moving away from gigabytes to then terabytes and then petabytes. And now companies are even doing more than, several petabytes a day. And you need data lakes. You need sort of that data lake model where maybe you take all of that network telemetry and system telemetry data, and it's going to that same data lake. Then you're just giving a different component or part of the elk stack to your MSSP to monitor. No SIEM required, but that's just me.
I mean, definitely interesting. And I think that will end our question section. I don't believe we have any additional questions. Thank you all for sending all those questions. It definitely helps us make this a little bit more dynamic and also answer a couple of good questions that you guys have and from your perspective. So with that said, if there aren't any more questions, we could go ahead and end the webinar. If you do have any questions, just feel free to send those over. We will be posting this video on our YouTube channel, So in case that you want to share this with someone else that might have missed the webinar, feel free to do so. But thank you so much, Alyssa. We hope that you enjoyed our webinar, and stay tuned for new webinars during the year.
Definitely. And if you're watching this as a recorded webinar, you know, we post these if you were unable to join us live. And definitely connect with me, subscribe to my YouTube channel, connect with me on Twitter, LinkedIn, DM me. Happy to answer any questions that anyone missed during the event. So take care of yourselves and each other.